Hello, welcome back to the Y Factor. This is episode 1 of Generation Y. Today, our why is why our generation is more connected yet more lonely. So let's get in. We have more people following us, watching us, liking our posts, and texting us than any generation in all of human history. And we have never felt more alone. That is not an opinion, that is not a vibe. That is a documented, measurable, clinically serious fact, and it is one of the strangest, most quietly devastating things happening to our generation right now. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, issued a formal public health advisory. Not about a virus, not about a new drug or a spike in car accidents, about loneliness. He called it an epidemic, using that word deliberately because epidemic has a specific meaning. It means widespread, it means spreading, it means serious enough to warrant a national response. He cited research showing that lacking meaningful social connection carries the same long term health risk as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, that persistent loneliness raises the risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia, and early death by measurable percentages. And he pointed specifically at one group as the most affected. Our generation here is what makes this so genuinely difficult to understand from the inside. We are the most connected generation that has ever existed. The average young person today has hundreds of followers, maybe thousands. Countless people have seen our face, our food, our opinions, our worst moments dressed up in good lighting. We carry a device that keeps us in contact with every person we have ever met forever. We have group chats that never sleep, feeds that never end, and the ability to be seen by more people in a single afternoon than our grandparents met in a lifetime. By every traditional measurement of what it means to be socially connected, we should be thriving. So, why are we the loneliest generation in recorded history? The easy answer is the phones. Put them down, go outside, talk to real people. We have all heard it, and it is not completely wrong, but it is also not the whole story. Because the phone is a symptom of something older and deeper, something that started shifting before most of us were born. To understand it, you have to go back to an idea a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg wrote about in 1989. He called them third places. A third place is not your home, that is the first place. It is not your school or your job, that is the second. A third place is everything in between. The coffee shop you drifted into on Sunday mornings. The basketball court down the street where the same group showed up without planning to. The community center, the bowling alley, the barber shop, the park bench where people gathered for no particular reason except that other people were already there. Oldenburg argued that these spaces were not optional. They were not extras or luxuries. They were the actual infrastructure of human connection. The places where you ran into people without scheduling it, where you did not have to perform or produce or justify your presence, you just existed alongside other people, and that, it turns out, was enough. Our generation inherited a world that had been quietly dismantling those spaces for decades. Malls closed, youth centers shut down, churches emptied, the cost of simply being somewhere went up. Third places became rarer, more expensive, harder to reach, and into the gap they left came something that promised everything Oldenburg described. Without the commute, without the weather, without any of the friction, social media. And here is where the research stops being comfortable. Psychologist named Jean Twenge spent years tracking generational data across hundreds of thousands of teenagers. In 2017, she published a piece that would eventually become a book, and the finding was stark. Around 2012, the year smartphone ownership crossed 50% among American teenagers, something in the data snapped. Rates of loneliness, anxiety, depression, and what researchers call social isolation did not just drift upward the way statistics sometimes do, they jumped, sharply, consistently. Across every demographic group she studied, Twenge did not claim smartphones were the only cause, but the timing was not a coincidence. The year we collectively moved our social lives into our phones was the year our actual sense of connection began to fall apart. She also found something that challenges every piece of conventional wisdom about screen time. It was not the quantity of use that mattered most. It was what the time online was replacing. Teenagers who spent time on social media instead of in person social activities, instead of sports, instead of just sitting around with friends, were the ones whose loneliness spiked. The app was not the problem by itself, the problem was what it pushed out of the way to get there. The question is why it does that so reliably. And for that, you need one more piece of science. A neuroscientist named John Cacioppo spent 2 decades studying loneliness. And what he found is this: the brain does not count notifications, it does not read follower counts or messages per day. What the brain actually registers as social connection is something far more specific reciprocal presence, the felt sense that another full human being, someone with their own life and their own weight, has chosen to give you their undivided attention. A like is not presence, a comment is not presence, even a text in the middle of the night is not quite presence. They are signals, and the brain receives them, and then it moves on, still hungry, because what it is actually looking for is a kind of attention that cannot be multitasked. Someone who is not also scrolling, someone who does not have somewhere more important to be. Cacciopo also found something that should change the way we think about loneliness entirely. It is not an emotion, it is a physiological state. When the brain perceives persistent social disconnection, it treats it as a threat. Cortisol rises, sleep becomes lighter, the immune system quietly weakens, the brain starts reading neutral situations as dangerous. A crowded room stops feeling like company and starts feeling like exposure. Other people stop feeling safe. And then the worst part, loneliness makes itself worse. The more isolated you feel, the more threatening social situations become, and the more you pull back from them. It is a spiral, not a setback. And here's what our generation walked straight into. We retreated from the noise of real social friction into apps that were designed to feel like connection, that gave us metrics for how well we were connecting: followers, views, likes, replies, a scoreboard for belonging. And because the scoreboard rewarded performance, we slowly began to optimize for it. We learned to say the right thing, frame the right image, be legible to an audience. But real connection does not work like that. Real connection is full of things that do not perform well: long pauses, wrong words, the specific awkward weight of being in a room with someone who owes you nothing and stays anyway. You cannot filter that. You cannot edit it, and you definitely cannot schedule it at a time that is convenient for your feed. There is a study that makes all of this concrete in a way numbers alone cannot. A researcher named Nicholas Christakis spent years mapping how behavior spread through social networks, and he found that loneliness itself is contagious. Not metaphorically, literally. If someone you know well becomes chronically lonely, your own risk of becoming lonely rises by 52%. If a friend of a friend becomes isolated, your risk still rises by 25%. Loneliness spreads through a community the way a cold does, silently, from person to person, before anyone realizes what is happening, which means we are not dealing with millions of individuals who separately and independently ended up feeling alone. We are dealing with something that moved through an entire generation like a wave. The governments noticed. In 2018, the United Kingdom created a cabinet level position to address what was happening: a minister for loneliness. Japan did the same in 2021. These are not soft gestures. These are governments acknowledging that a piece of essential social infrastructure had collapsed, and in both countries, the data pointed most clearly at young people. A Cigna survey in 2020 found that Generation Z was the loneliest generation ever measured, lonelier than the elderly, lonelier than middle aged adults, lonelier than any cohort researchers had ever studied before. The generation with the most friends in their phones, the loneliest in history, our generation. Here is what matters about understanding all of this. Knowing the mechanism does not make the loneliness disappear, but it changes what you do with it. Because if the problem is not that we are broken or incapable of connection, but that we were handed a world with the wrong infrastructure and then sold a replacement that was never designed to actually replace it, then the answer is not to feel worse about ourselves. The answer is to rebuild deliberately. A third place does not have to be a bowling alley. It can be anything with the same structure: something regular, something low stakes, something where showing up is enough and no one needs you to perform. A running group, a weekly dinner, a class you go to even when you do not feel like it, the specifics matter less than the pattern. This generation did not fail at connection. We were handed a brilliant, beautiful simulation of it. We were told it was the same thing. And then we felt quietly crazy for still being hungry. The why is not that we are weak. The why is that connection was always something you had to actually be present for, not a signal you sent, not a story you posted, a physical, reciprocal, friction filled experience of being near another person who is also fully there. We are the loneliest generation in history because we are the first generation to be offered a substitute convincing enough that we stopped looking for the real thing. And now we know why. Before you go, a small thing. This is episode 1 of Generation Y, a series about the things our generation feels and can't explain. It only keeps going if you're here to watch it. So if this one landed, hit subscribe. It costs nothing. It means more than you think for a channel this size. And drop it in the comments. What is the thing you feel but cannot put into words? What is the why you carry around that no one has explained properly? The next 6 episodes go deep, and I will see you in episode 2 because everything has a why, even the loneliness that makes no sense when you have never been more surrounded. Now tell me, which why should we pull apart next? Drop your question in the comments. And if you like finding the hidden reason behind everyday things, subscribe to the Why Factor.